Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I have a really interesting guest and topic tonight. Falun Gong is the topic. We're going to chat with Joel Chipkar. You know, we've seen them in the parks during slow motion exercises. We've seen them protesting in front of the Chinese consulate every day for the last 25 years. Falun Gong is the topic. In 1999, the Chinese Communist Party started persecuting them. Who are these people? What do they believe? And why is the Communist Party so afraid of them? With me today is Joel Chipkar. He's a 32-year veteran in the real estate business. He's a property investor, and he's also a spokesperson for Falun Gong. For over 25 years, Joel has spoken out for freedom of Falun Gong practitioners persecuted in China. In 2001, he helped organize and execute an international appeal in Tiananmen Square that made headlines worldwide and brought awareness of the atrocities happening against Falun Gong practitioners. In 2004, he won an unprecedented lawsuit in Ontario against the Vice Consul General of China for libel. He's worked with the Canadian government, the Ottawa, Edmonton, Toronto, and York Region Police Departments, the RCMP, the CSIS, and Immigration and Refugee Board in his capacity as experts on Falun Gong and related issues. He's been interviewed by media bodies across Canada and has been presented at the Department of Foreign Affairs, the United Nations, Human Rights Commission, and the House of Commons before the Subcommittee on Human Rights. He's also started a YouTube channel talking about his experiences with Falun Gong. Wow. Joel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for the opportunity.
So tell me, first off, what is Falun Gong and why is someone like you, a businessman, a Canadian businessman living in Mississauga, involved in this organization?
Well, Brian, 30 years ago, I realized that the two most important days of my life was the day I was born and the day I discovered why. And for most of my life, I chased wealth and fame thinking that that was the reason why, right? But no matter how much money I had, I couldn't find my peace. I had this deep fear, this rage, and emptiness in my soul that I couldn't shake. And because of the stress I suffered from years of chronic low back pain, you know, I saw millionaires and celebrities dying, leaving everything behind. And I realized that money and fame meant nothing. And if I died tomorrow, I'd be forgotten in 3 generations, right? I also realized that I was afraid of death. I was terrified. Deep down, I knew that the meaning of life had to be more profound than just seeking comfort or things in this life, right? So in 95, I traveled the world to find answers, and I ended up in India where I met spiritual leaders and tried every practice under the sun. And a year later, I realized that everybody had the answer as long as I had the money to pay them. So I came home, and 3 years later, I discovered this Falun Gong, right? And for the first time, I felt safe. It like taught me humbleness. It taught me gratefulness, the power of truthfulness, and the importance of being kind to others, right? It also taught me that these attachments that we hold on to so deeply, like selfishness, fear, competition, greed, anger, resentment, not only destroy our lives, but they also stop us from enlightening to our higher spiritual selves, right? And I mean, what set Falun Gong apart from everything else I tried is that it worked. It helped me strengthen my 23-year marriage. It helped me heal the relationship with my dad before he died. And it empowered me to connect with my soul in a way that I had never learned or experienced before. And 26 years later, it still works.
How'd you bump into Falun Gong?
My mom was actually practicing it, actually. When I got home from India, she had, my mom was always famous for bringing home the spiritual flavor of the month, right? And this time when she brought home Falun Gong, I was kind of looking at her out of the corner of my eye. But I started to see fantastic changes in her attitude. She started becoming a lot more calm, a lot more compassionate. We used to be able to push her buttons and she'd fly off the handle, but we couldn't get to her anymore. And I saw this, right? And I started looking into the teachings myself, and I realized that it was something that I really wanted to try to incorporate into my life.
So give me an example of some of its teachings, if you could.
Well, first off, Falun Gong believes that every human being has divine origins, right? That's what the soul is. And it teaches that at the fundamental core of the universe and our molecular and spiritual existence is this energy called Zhen Shen Ren, or truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. And if, as people, we can assimilate ourselves to these principles in our thoughts and our actions, we'll actually lead happier lives and reach our true spiritual selves, and also ultimately break the cycle of life and rebirth when it's time for us to pass on from this place, right? Like in practical terms, Falun Gong offers 5 energy exercises with spiritual and practical and scientific principles on the meaning of life, spirituality, and the universe that people can incorporate into their lives to help them eliminate these attachments, right? Be more compassionate to others and unmoved when life inevitably goes sideways. And it's hard, man. I mean, true spirituality isn't easy.
So truthfulness, I can understand. Compassion, I can understand. What's forbearance?
Good question. Forbearance. If you hit me, I don't hit you back. If you yell at me, I don't yell at you back, right? Falun Gong teaches that there's these energies that are involved. Some people call it karma. Some people call it virtue. If you do good things to people, you gain this virtue, which helps you to assimilate closer to these higher, more pure spiritual energies, right? Universal energies. If you fight back, if someone, yells at you or mistreats you, and you mistreat them back, you're basically throwing back that opportunity. You're giving back the karma. You're creating karma. You're giving them back that virtue that you could otherwise gain to get yourself closer to being more altruistic, right? Being more compassionate, being more tolerant. And growing up in our generations, Brian, I mean, it's hard, right? Like we've all been kind of conditioned. I say I've been addicted to my deep rage, like this deep anger that I had in my soul, right? Things never went my way. I would always point my finger at others to change. If my wife would change this much, we'd get along that much better. Like it was always someone else's fault. And when I learned Falun Gong, I realized that the magical tool is actually looking within. If I could look within to find that responsibility on myself to change, then my whole environment changed, right? So it empowers me. It kind of gives me that choice to make different choices when life inevitably serves us up a tribulation, right?
So, most people think tit for tat. Someone hits you, you hit them back. For every response, there's an equal and opposite response. Forbearance says no, that's not right.
Now, forbearance is that's what forbearance means. If you hit me, I don't hit you back, because I know the higher principles. Like on this level, if you hit me, I hit you back, I might look stronger. But on a spiritual level, you're actually the weaker one. You're actually losing something really important. Like we're basically here in this life in order to learn how to get back to where we come from. So we're not talking about, everyday principles of fighting or war or, one-upping each other, competition, right? We're talking about, again, compassion, right? What does that mean? What does that word mean? What does that actually mean to be kind to somebody? What does it mean to be selfless? I never knew, right? I always thought I was a good person. I always thought I would help people because I was a nice person. But deep down, there was always something in it for me, right? Like I wanted you to think I was a nice guy. So there was that kind of ulterior motive. And where did you learn? Like, where could you possibly learn something different? And again, I traveled all the way around the world. I spent thousands in therapy. Self-help never took me anywhere. But Falun Gong taught me that there's another way. Like there's a higher way that we can follow. The ancient Chinese used to call it the way, right? Or the Tao. And if we can assimilate ourselves to these higher understandings, these higher universal and spiritual principles, then our relationships will improve, right? Our lives will improve. We'll feel that peace and that contentment. And we'll be able to make other changes.
This sort of sounds like Buddhism. Is it Buddhism?
Yes and no. It's got the same goals as what these spiritual founders and of those religions taught, that we're all spiritual beings, right? And when we pass on from this place, our soul continues on. So we got to do the best to purify ourselves here in this lifetime. However, in Falun Gong, there's no worship, there's no rituals. It's taught for free. There's no buildings to finance. It's more of a personal journey. And what I truly respected coming from a business background is it taught that you have to work hard. You must be responsible to your family and to society. So that's also a part of the path.
But for some reason, the Communist Party is really against Falun Gong. We're going to take a break for some messages and can come back with Mr. Chipkar and chat a little bit about why the Communist Party seems so incredibly scared of Falun Gong. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. This is going to be an interesting conversation tonight with Joel Chipkar. He is a Mississauga-based, Toronto-based real estate developer, investor, property owner, etc., who 25 years ago got motivated by, inspired by Falun Gong, and now he is a business person, a spokesperson for Falun Gong. We've just been chatting about what Falun Gong is, But why is it so? Why is the Communist Party so scared of Falun Gong? Tell us that, please.
Well, thanks for the question, Brian. The persecution started over a quarter century ago, right? And I don't know about you, but I can't remember what I had for breakfast, let alone what happened 25 years ago. Most people don't remember Falun Gong was the fastest growing spiritual practice in China's history. It was supported, awarded, and even endorsed by the Communist Party. Officials even praised it for helping save the country over 100 billion Chinese dollars per year in medical fees. So then on July 20th, 1999, the government banned Falun Gong and created this Gestapo-like entity called the 610 Office to eliminate the group. All businesses and schools were forced to expose Falun Gong practitioners to authorities. Lawyers were barred from representing them. There were nationwide book burnings and state-run propaganda campaigns painting Falun Gong as a threat to China, and authorities were ordered to use all means necessary to eliminate the group, right? So to date, reports indicate over 1 million practitioners have been detained in re-education camps where they face forced labor, torture, rape, violent ideological transformation. There have been thousands of confirmed deaths, and some people and experts say crimes against humanity and genocide is happening. So your question, why the turnaround?
Why?
Well,
Why? If it's compassion and truthfulness and forbearance, why?
yeah. Since the Cultural Revolution, all spiritual practices in China must be controlled by the Communist Party, right? And when the founder of Falun Gong refused to let the party control and profit from it, the Communist Party started to attack it. Also, the Communist Party openly called the conflict with Falun Gong theological. The former Communist Party head, Jiang Zemin, stated, "How could our Marxist theory not crush what Falun Gong propagates? If it were true, we'd be laughing stocks. The Communist Party must eliminate Falun Gong." So at the time, CNN senior China analyst reported that Falun Gong was peaceful and that the Communist Party had shown no proof of Falun Gong's links to political forces. But also, Brian, you got to remember, we're talking about the Chinese Communist Party, right? They're responsible for the deaths of over 80 million Chinese since 1949. They still suppress Tibet. They persecute the Christians. They're ethnically cleansing the Muslim Uyghurs. In '89, they massacred thousands of peaceful democracy students. In '97, they covered up the bird flu. In 2003, they covered up SARS that killed people worldwide. And in 2020, they covered up COVID for 6 weeks, allowing it to spread around the world and kill millions. So the persecution of Falun Gong represents yet just one more facet of the party's systematic campaign of irrationality, lies.
Hold it, stop, roll back. You're saying that the Chinese Communist Party covered up bird flu, SARS, and COVID?
Yeah. They covered up COVID for 6 weeks, allowing it to spread around the world.
What's your proof of that?
Oh, I'm not prepared to get into that now, but I will send you the articles. They covered up COVID. They knew about COVID being able to be transmitted from human to human for 6 weeks before they allowed that information to the international community.
And same thing with SARS, same thing with bird flu?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know what? They've been proven as irrational liars, masters at repression and control, right? So. Okay,
sorry, I interrupted. Continue, please.
No worries. They're good questions, but like I'll send you the research of this. I'm surprised you don't know about it. Yeah, they definitely covered up COVID, and that was one of the reasons why it was so devastating around the world. So,
but again, if is it just lack of control? Like it sounds like this is a great thing: truthfulness, compassion. Forbearance sounds like it's great stuff. Why would someone want to get rid of it? Just because I can't profit from it?
Well, again, you're talking about an atheist, Marxist regime, right? This regime is responsible for the Cultural Revolution that forced people into communist ideology. They destroyed 5,000 years of spiritual and traditional culture and forced people into communist ideology, right? Mao's Little Red Book. Like they have a time-tested history of being completely controlling, especially when it comes to faith, because faith gives people power, right? Like, again, Jiang Zemin said, how could our Marxist theory not crush what Falun Gong propagates? Falun Gong propagated, again, truthfulness, right? Compassion, non-materialism, right? Like, you can work hard in society and gain from that, but don't be attached to it. Don't pursue wealth. Don't pursue these things, because they're ultimately not taking you to where you really want to go, right? Whereas the Communist Party was completely based on materialism at the time. So it had a lot to do with also the Communist Party leader at the time, Jiang Zemin, was the number one guy, the main guy to crack down on Falun Gong, whereas high-ranked members of the Communist Party and their families were practicing at the time, right? So CNN at the time, Willie Lam, the China senior analyst with CNN, stated that it looked like Jiang Zemin was using them to promote allegiance to himself, right? Like he did, like they did with the crackdown on the student democracies in 1989. They were peaceful. Why did they cry? Why did they murder those kids? Why are the mothers still restricted from mourning the deaths of those Tiananmen Square kids in public today? You're talking about a pernicious, controlling, destructive regime. And it's time tested. Ask the Tibetans, ask the Uyghurs, ask the Christians, ask the underground Christians in China. It doesn't stop, right?
Now, you were in a court case that I understand you won because you said it was the Communist Party said it was a cult, and you disagreed. Or tell me about what happened there.
Well, again, getting back to SARS, right? In 2003, the Communist Party was condemned actually worldwide for covering up SARS, right? It caused global spread and the deaths of 16 people here in Toronto. So I wrote a letter to the Toronto Star expressing frustration over the Communist Party's cover-up, just like they were covering up the persecution of Falun Gong. So the Star published a response from China's Vice Consul General in Toronto, falsely denying the cover-up and calling me a member of a sinister cult. So I sued him for libel. And in my testimony, I explained how propaganda is used in every genocide to eliminate groups of people, and how the Communist Party's portrayal of Falun Gong as a cult, political or anti-China, has been central to their campaign to eliminate our group. In my testimony, I quoted Ian Johnson. He's a journalist and senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, right? He won the Pulitzer Prize for exposing the mass torture and killing of people who practice Falun Gong. In his book, he stated that Falun Gong did not meet the definitions of a cult. Its members marry outside the group, have outside friends, hold normal jobs, don't live isolated from society, and don't believe that the world is going to end. Most importantly, suicide's not accepted, nor is physical violence. Falun Gong at heart is an apolitical, inward discipline aimed at cleansing oneself spiritually and improving one's health. So I also quoted China religious scholar Professor David Owenby here in Canada. He stated that the entire cult label was a red herring from the beginning, cleverly exploited by the Chinese state to blunt the appeal of Falun Gong and the effects of the group's activities outside of China. He also stated journalists and scholars who label Falun Gong a cult are usually looking for sensationalism and do so at the expense of careful analysis. So in the end, I won the case, right? But unfortunately, some media still echo the cult label when reporting on Falun Gong, that which further stigmatizes the community. Yeah.
Why?
That's a good question, and I have a good answer for that. It has a lot to do with the Communist Party's propaganda campaign, again, being the number one weapon being used in every genocide, right? It's propaganda. So it's basically spreads lies against victims of human rights crimes to create indifference and controversy, right? So in 2001, Amnesty International and others reported that a massive propaganda campaign was being used by the Communist Party to paint Falun Gong as dangerous and political. A Communist Party official also told the Washington Post that the crackdown would not be working if the propaganda had not changed what the public thought about the once respected Falun Gong. And 25 years later, the narrative that Falun Gong is political or some sort of cult permeates media, creating an indifference and suspicion towards them, rather than reporting on the true situation that these people are being butchered to death by a pernicious regime. Also, in 99, the crackdown came at a really bad time. Western governments and businesses and media wanted closer ties with booming China, right? Especially in the lead up to the 2008 Beijing Olympics. So this was the carrot to further silence governments and media.
Did you win damages?
Yeah. Oh, about my law case. Yeah, I won damages. The court awarded me $10,000, and we went to the Bank of China to freeze his accounts, but China had already sent him back to China.
So he had diplomatic immunity or something.
No, he didn't actually. That was the great thing about it is, I went to 6 different lawyers and nobody would take the case because everybody thought this guy had diplomatic immunity. So I managed to find this brilliant lawyer named Peter Downard from Fasken and Martineau, and Peter argued that consulate officials and diplomats fall under 2 different conventions, right? Consular immunity falls under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, which is also governed by the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. So when this guy, the China's vice consul general, slandered me, he stepped out of his consular functions as defined by the Vienna Convention, right? And he also violated international conventions on civil and political rights, which protect attacks against reputation and prohibits advocacy of national or religious hatred. So yeah, I won the case. It was
But you never got the $10,000.
No, still waiting.
If he ever comes back to Canada.
Yeah.
I've heard reports that Falun Gong people are being killed for their organs. Seriously?
Yeah. David Matus, right? David Kilgore. You know them. David Matus is a highly respected lawyer. He's legal counsel for B'nai B'rith. Of course, the late David Kilgore, member of Parliament, fantastic philanthropist. They were the first to expose this issue on the world stage back in 2006. They first published over 80 pieces of strong evidence pointing to the fact that Falun Gong practitioners and others were actually being murdered by Chinese state-run hospitals for their organs. And again, before these allegations, state media propaganda had brainwashed society to believe that Falun Gong was this anti-China cult, so nobody cared if they lived or died. And again, Ian Johnson, the Pulitzer Prize article, exposed that mass torture and killings of practitioners were happening, and he stated that the effect on society of such systematic brutality is hard to gauge. None of the deaths have been reported in the Chinese media. So then in 2006, we had families who were reporting that loved ones were disappearing from labor camps in these prisons. And Chinese hospital websites were then advertising organs for sale in English, kidneys for 60,000, hearts for 100,000, lungs for 120,000, with a guarantee that if that organ didn't take, they would have another one for you within 2 weeks. Where were they getting the organs from? Well, David Matus and David Kilgore exposed massive discrepancies in the Communist Party-run hospitals, where records revealed over 41,000 unaccounted for organ donors were there at the time, right? So other investigations would later estimate that since 2006, over 1 million organs were used in transplants and likely taken.
1 million organs used in transplants.
1 million organs
1 million.
were taken, yeah. From people like Falun Gong who've been murdered and other prisoners of conscience as well.
How come I've never heard about this? What's going on? Is the media silent about all this?
Well, like again, we've touched on it already, right? The massive propaganda campaign that Amnesty International talked about in 2001. Again, yeah, the media's been silent. The media's been completely silent.
You're saying the Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party, is controlling our media?
Yeah, I believe that 100%. In 2001, they started in 2001 in the lead up to the Beijing Olympics. James Murdoch, son of media mogul Rupert Murdoch, returned to America from China, and out of the blue, he started to publicly attack Falun Gong with Communist Party propaganda for no reason. After the New York Times publisher met with Jiang Zemin in 2001, NewYorkTimes.com was suddenly unblocked in China. Ever since, most of the Times articles on Falun Gong have been riddled with factual errors and damaging labels that fuel hatred towards our group. In November 2007, the CBC here in Canada, who held the broadcast rights for the Beijing Olympics, canceled a documentary on Falun Gong the day it was supposed to air. So, and it was found that the Chinese embassy was behind that cancellation. Public pressure forced the documentary to be aired after edits, right? And similar reports showed how Washington Post editors were killing stories of Falun Gong after being contacted by the Chinese embassy. A 2015 New York Times reporter even testified that New York Times editors were killing stories about Falun Gong practitioners being killed for their organs by the Communist Party. In recent years, the Communist Party's United Front Work Department has increasingly co-opted Western academics, journalists, and social media influencers to promote Falun Gong as an evil cult in exchange for payment and benefits. And a quarter century later, clickbait journalists irresponsibly just keep echoing the propaganda narrative rather than doing their investigations. And those that do are shut down by their editors.
Have you been at risk?
Me personally,
Yes.
you know what? I haven't felt any risk here in Canada as a Western, a Western Canadian. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about the people in the community who are mostly Chinese Canadians. We actually had a chance to write a 130-page report on the Communist Party's 25-year transnational repression campaign against Falun Gong practitioners here in Canada, which details tactics including spreading hate propaganda and disinformation to public and government, physical and verbal assaults, surveillance, intimidation, and threats to Falun Gong practitioners' families in China, economic pressure to exclude Falun Gong from community events. An example happened actually in November 2023 when the Ottawa Dragon Boat Festival that was sponsored by the Chinese embassy had to apologize to a 74-year-old man who was asked to remove his Falun Gong t-shirt by the executive director of the festival. So there's been also political interference on all three levels. Members of parliament have received threatening letters that if they support Falun Gong, they'll lose business ties with China. We've had city councilors vote down Falun Gong Day because of pressure from the Chinese embassy. We've had mayors rescind proclamation after returning from China. We've received death and bomb threats, and there's now an elaborate fake email campaign where Chinese agents are impersonating Falun Gong practitioners by sending insulting, bizarre, and threatening emails to our Canadian politicians aiming to discredit the community as irrational. And it's been pretty effective.
So we had this big, inquiry into foreign interference in our politics. Has this got a connection to what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's got a huge connection. We have a lot of information where the Chinese Communist Party has been basically interfering and trying to influence our elected officials to follow the party line, not just on Falun Gong, but on all kinds of different issues, or face trade sanctions from China. You know, it's widely known. Whenever the Dalai Lama writes something, for International Human Rights Day, the Chinese government gets up there and says, if you don't rescind this, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. They're bullies. That's what they are.
What's the Canadian government doing, if anything?
The Canadian government under Paul Martin was actually first to condemn China on the persecution of Falun Gong. They also helped to rescue some Falun Gong practitioners from China, along with some other awesome members of parliament like the Erwin Kotler, right, the old justice minister. But after that, they became silent for the most part, right? We've had some very supportive members of parliament from all parties who have tabled motions and stood with us, but the numbers are few, and we believe this is due to the disinformation targeting our elected officials and also the Communist Party's foreign interference. However, we were really happy this December when the Canadian government sanctioned 8 Chinese officials for human rights violations targeting Falun Gong and other groups. So we hope these efforts, and especially the public condemnation for the persecution of Falun Gong, becomes louder, because public condemnation is what the Communist Party fears most. They're deathly afraid of being exposed for their crimes in public. So the more we state this out loud, the more we show them that we're not afraid of them, right? If we cower to them, then they just get stronger and they start pushing us around.
Joel Chipkar,
And you know what?
thanks
Today,
so much
Brian,
for
today Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for raising this. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in 2 minutes with Joel Chipkar, talking about Falun Gong, talking about what it stands for, talking about how he got involved, and most importantly, talking about the persecution that has taken place for 25 plus years. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're having an interesting conversation tonight with Joel Chipkar. He is a spokesperson for Falun Gong and their persecution in Canada and around the world, particularly, I guess, in China. He's a local Mississauga real estate developer, businessman, property owner, etc. But about 25 years ago, he got involved in Falun Gong. He's won an important court case against it, and I think what you've said has changed your life. Maybe we could take a step back for a second, Joel. You said there were these three principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. And then you said there were 5 exercises. Could you tell us a little bit about those 5 exercises?
Yeah, for sure. Basically, in a nutshell, Falun Gong is, in practical terms, it's the 5 energy exercises combined with the principles of how to become more truthful, compassionate, and forbearant in order to attune to these higher universal energies or principles, right? So in order to purify your body, to purify your mind, and also to purify your soul. Now, part of that is purifying your body. And the Falun Gong has these 5 Qigong exercises, these energy exercises that help do that. And, when I first started Falun Gong, I was in good shape. I was a wrestling star in school. I taught kickboxing up into my 30s. Like, I was in really good shape. But, I always felt tired. I felt a bit lethargic. My mind was, again, always, fighting with these demons of anger and desires and stuff. And when I started to do Falun Gong, I started to get into the exercises, and I realized that, all my life I had, attacked my body with alcohol, smoking, drugs, lack of sleep, bad food. So when I started doing these exercises, I just felt an amazing shift. Actually, the first time I tried them, I almost passed out because the energy was just so powerful. I never felt anything like that before. It wasn't like a physical thing, because like I would be holding the wheel, which is one of the exercises where you hold the wheel in front of your, it's like a meditation exercise. And I'd open my eyes and I'd see my elderly mother standing behind me with a smile on her face, holding that wheel. And for me, I couldn't keep my arms up, even though I was a strong guy. I couldn't keep my arms up. And I realized it wasn't a strength thing. It was because my mind wasn't clean. It was because my body wasn't clean. And in Falun Gong, it uses this analogy of a bottle filled with dirt, right? You put a lot of dirt in the bottle and you throw it in the water, and the bottle floats to the bottom. If you let out some of that dirt, the bottle floats up. If you let out some more, the bottle floats up a bit more. If you let out all the dirt, the bottle floats right to the top, and you couldn't push it down even if you tried. Well, I realized my mind was like that bottle of dirt. It was full of attachments to things like desire, anxiety, want, stress, anger, right? And the more I emptied my mind of these things, the more not only my spirit floated up, but also my body became lighter. I could sleep like a baby. I stopped, worrying so much all the time. My chronic back issues that I had for almost all my life completely disappeared. And I couldn't figure out, it's still almost impossible for me to kind of explain. But that analogy of that bottle kind of summed it up for me. And 26 years later, it still works.
So is this like yoga or Tai Chi or what?
Interesting. Yeah, yoga and Tai Chi are practices that really help, for health and fitness, right? Where Falun Gong is a complete cultivation practice. It's a practice for the mind and the body, right? So it's a complete cultivation practice. You're not just focusing on your body, but you're also focusing on your mind. It's to help purify your mind by using higher spiritual and also scientific principles, to help you assimilate to these higher understandings of what truthfulness actually means, right? What compassion actually means, and what tolerance or forbearance actually means. And when you do attune to these things and you basically open yourself up to enlightening to higher, different understandings and perspectives of our environment and in the world we live in.
So I apologize. I don't understand. Do I go to I go to a building and hear a sermon about truthfulness, or do I read a holy book, or like how do I learn about these higher principles of truthfulness?
Yeah, good question. We started an online webinar actually in 2020 during COVID to help people with their stress. And in that webinar, we lay it all out for you. We teach you how to do the exercises. We teach you where to find the main book of Falun Gong, which is called Juan Falun. And this book is basically spiritual and practical and also scientific principles on how to assimilate our minds and our bodies to these higher universal qualities and principles, right? In that book's 407 pages, and in the book, from my memory, it mentions over 270 times how important it is to lead a moral life, to be kind to others, in order to reach more high-level spiritual understandings, right? It's not about exercises. Exercises are kind of like a supplement to the practice to help, adjust our bodies. But the most important thing is getting back to traditional values, getting back to understanding what it means to be a compassionate and selfless person. So we read this book. I read this book every day, and it helps me, again, with these addictive behaviors that I had all my life, right? These addictive behaviors of anger, of desire, of jealousy, right? So when things go sideways, instead of going down that familiar path that I've always went down, instead, Falun Gong gives me another choice. Try this instead, Try being compassionate instead. Try not opening your mouth instead. Try not fighting back instead, and see where that takes you. See if you can, let go of that attachment and see where that takes you. So it's been an interesting journey for the past 26 years.
So, in Judaism, there's the golden rule of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And Christianity, it has that, but then takes it farther with turn the other cheek. Is that forbearance?
That's forbearance. Yeah. In my understanding, that's forbearance, because we're not just looking at things from a human perspective or human principles, right? We're trying to look at things from a higher perspective. It's like, we're human beings, and the reason why we're here is to ascend back to where we come from, right? It's what the spiritual teachers like Jesus or the Buddha taught, thousands of years ago, that our main purpose of being here is getting back to actually where we come from. And in order to do that, you have to look towards higher level principles. Like, put it this way, if I was to die tomorrow, would I be allowed, let's say, up to a place called heaven, right? That's supposed to be pure and altruistic. If I still had lust in my body, if I still had anger in my system or jealousy, right? Maybe I'd go up there and I'd see some beautiful angel and have some wicked thoughts, or maybe I'd see how great some God was and be jealous. Like, it would never happen, right? So in order to kind of ascend this realm of karma, we try to live our lives with a higher understanding of what these principles are, what it means to be forbearant, what it means to be truthful. And the energy behind those things will hopefully take our souls to a higher level when we pass on from this place, right? So it's not just like praying and then going out and, gambling or stealing a car or something like this, and then coming back and praying again, saying, "Oh God, I'm sorry." In my understanding, that's not going to get you anywhere. Like, you have to do the work. You have to put in the effort in order to reap that reward, right? Like, you have to get to that realm in order for you to be worthy enough to be at that realm. Because if someone like me was to get up there and to this altruistic place, this beautiful place, I wouldn't feel worthy. I'd say I have to go. I can't be here. I don't feel like I belong, right? So it's a little bit of a analogy of kind of understanding what it means to walk that spiritual path, right? It's not just like, breathing out of your eyes like a lava lizard and think that you're going to gain these spiritual energies. It's hard work, man, and you got to put in the effort. So,
okay, so how did you do this hard work? What was the effort you did? Did you go to these webinars? Did you go to
like I said, when
400
somebody
page book? What'd you do?
Yeah, when somebody pushes your buttons, it's almost like this entity grabs you and wants you to fight back. It wants you to contend, right? Like, when you see that thing or that person that it wants you to be filled with all these desires. And And the hard work is not doing that, is stopping that, is going toward that other direction. And what the guide is that book. That book from Falun Gong is called Juan Falun, and that book is for free. You can get it online at learnfalungong.com, where it's the guide that helps us on a daily basis try to stay within those principles of truth, compassion, and tolerance when the inevitable tribulations of life come up, right? So basically, in a nutshell, we do 5 exercises every day, right? 4 standing exercises and a sitting meditation. And we read a book that basically spells out practical, spiritual, and also scientific principles on how to be a good person.
Has it
That's it.
changed your life, Joel?
I say it changed my life. Yeah. Again, I don't know where I'd be with my marriage if it wasn't for Falun Gong. It gave me that time and that understanding to make peace with my dad before he died, which was really important to me. Deep down, I still have attachments. I have these attachments to sadness because I knew I could have done better with my father. But I'm really thankful, and I cherish what Falun Gong had given me to make that effort to come to peace with him before he passed away, because time is brutal, man. It's over in a snap, right? Like I think I'm still 20, but I'm 56, right? It goes by so fast. And all we have is the moments, and to cherish each other, right? To cherish everyone in our lives, because they're gone in a second and we're gone in a second. So what does that actually mean, right? How can I be a more compassionate, a more kind person? I couldn't find it anywhere else. And for me, Falun Gong gave me those answers. So yeah, it changed my life.
We're going to take a final break and come back with some concluding comments from Joel Chipkar in 2 minutes, talking about Falun Gong and how it's changed his life, how the Communist Party, Chinese Communist Party, has been persecuting it, and what he thinks the future is. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, where we're having an interesting, I think a really interesting conversation with Joel Chipkar today about Falun Gong. Frankly, I really didn't know much about it. And when you mentioned that the Communist Party was saying it was a cult, I probably thought that as well. And so I'm a little bit intrigued by this conversation, Joel. I really appreciate it. You got any final thoughts you want to leave with us?
Yeah. I always use this quote from Mr. Chen Yanling. He was a high-ranked Chinese embassy official in Australia. He was responsible for silencing the voice of Falun Gong in Australia, right? He defected because of his conscience, and he summed it all up by testifying that the Chinese Communist Party has always relied on violence, lies, and atheism to maintain its power. They could not understand Falun Gong's peaceful efforts to protect their freedom of belief. Now they cannot let the international community know what they've done to Falun Gong in China. And that's why they're so determined to eliminate Falun Gong, because we're the evidence of their 25 years of horrific human rights abuses. It's in their best interest to silence us any way they can. And, for the past 25 years, right, horrific crimes against humanity have been happening to 70 to 100 million people in China. And the Communist Party is targeting Canadians to become complicit by fostering skepticism and indifference towards practitioners of Falun Gong here. But, actions speak louder than lies, right? So when media and government ignored the suffering of these people took it upon themselves to save lives, right? They hand out flyers, they created media organizations, they sought government help, and they started raising awareness through cultural shows like Shenyang, right? And whether or not you understand Falun Gong or not, the truth is clear. For over a quarter century, we've remained peaceful in our fight to save lives while being attacked by the world's most powerful communist regime and their media allies. And for 25 years, we're still standing here. I mean, just imagine what kind of strength that takes, what kind of faith that takes, and what this truly says about the teaching of Falun Gong, right? So we urge everyone to protect your integrity from the Communist Party and reject mainstream media propaganda and lies aimed at harming innocent people. Visit our websites for the truth, make decisions based on facts, and stand on the right side of history, because like all genocides, the persecution of Falun Gong is going to end, and then everyone is going to know the truth.
If people want to learn more, where do they go?
Join our webinar, learnfalungong.com. We also have an information website that can show you all of the information, all of the transnational repression happening all around the world. It's called faluninfo.net. So learnfalungong.com or faluninfo.net.
Well, this has been really interesting, Joel. I really appreciate you joining us. I don't know, maybe I'll go check out your websites, but I got to tell you, unquestionably, persecution and human rights abuses are wrong. And so in that manner, I completely understand and agree with you. And then, you know what? Truthfulness, compassion, turn the other cheek, forbearance. I think those are pretty good universal principles. And I congratulate you for learning them, adopting them into your life, and having them change your life, because it sounds pretty impactful and a good lesson to all of us. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I really appreciate it.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videos are on my website, briancrombie.com, and go up on YouTube and social media and podcast servers as soon as the radio show goes to air. Wow. Truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Pretty good principles in life. Good night, everybody.